Now, the first map will be on Daybreak, as far as I know, Andre.
Yes, sir.
And I'm confirming it by looking over to your screen.
It is also a best of 5, so I'm really excited for these two players. Of course, Sortof, the very, very standard player against Dark, who I thought was very standard. Well, actually has a weird standard, I should say. Last game, he had an indicator to actually tell him that an all-in would work, so I don't mind that at all. But, of course, what really blows up in my mind is his Infestor Roach style, and that's all he does all game long.
Yeah, and when we say Infestor Roach, usually because whatever the first unit is usually like the most prevalent. Like when you say Stalker Sentry, it's more Stalkers than Sentry. When you say, you know, Muta Ling, it's well actually not in that case. I take that back.
Ling Muta. Ling Muta. You mean you?
Everyone says Ling. Unless you're like Violet or someone that goes pure. When you go Muta Ling, you go like 40 Mutas and like 10 Lings. But in this case, when we say Infestor Roach, it's Infestors with maybe a cameo by a roach or two.
Exactly.
It's like 45 Infestors and maybe 10 roaches kind of thing.
And you know, I did this on ladder yesterday night too. I was like, oh, I'm going to be like Dark, be all cool. Of course, he's over here in the top right-hand position. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. I have 50 infested Terrans every single minute. And I died. And I don't know what happened.
That's right. He tried it right after the cast. And I guess you'll be studying him very closely, and we'll see how those things kind of pan out. But it looks like we're going to go already immediate deviation of builds of hatchery first compared to pool hatchery, and that's just the nature of Sortof. He plays a lot safer. Daybreak, a map that you can generally go hatch first on because of the long, windy distance it takes to get to your opponent.
Yes, sir. And
I don't mind it.
I feel like 15 hatch is the go-to, but the difference in build, again, I mean, ZVZ has worked out to the point where, excuse me, both these players probably will differ in maybe one, maybe even a half of a drone. That's how close their builds will be. It's going to transpose into a very standard macro game, I'm sure. Daybreak facilitates that, so I highly doubt we'll see some sort of quick victory or even quick advantage by either of these players.
Now, we do see a much earlier gas from Sortof as opposed to Dark. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of what Sortof is. He's playing more towards a little bit safer route. Now, Daybreak is a map where I would say that a lot of people still love that Roach-based ZVZ, but do other styles work? Like, I don't really see mutas that often in this map. Does that even work on Daybreak, Andre?
Sometimes. Sometimes. Muta is like, it's that trump card, man, that sometimes it's amazing and obviously kills a ton, but most of the time it just does not work out at all, and it's because of the power of those infestors. But, you know, there has been a switch lately. Mutas have been actually really, really good in that early mid-game stage when you're actually going against nothing.
And it's not
right?
even
nothing on the
necessarily
map that
committing
actually
to
kills
mutos,
you.
right?
Exactly.
It's like you can just make like the 8 or 9 that Violet loves to make, and then you can immediately switch over to Mass Roach while controlling third timers.
That's exactly right. I would even say less than that. 5 or 6 is better. Because remember, 5 or 6, that's about 4 infestors. And 4 infestors, you can actually clear up some infestors. You can get great map control. You can get the earlier third. Put pressure on an opponent's third if they're going like defensive infestors rather than trying to be aggressive with roaches like we saw with game number 1 between Dark versus Black.
Yeah, I can see where you're going with that, Andre. And they come down to stylistic things, but for now we see early Baneling Nest. Now, by track history alone, Sortof has just been playing really well in ZVZs, and he's been taking more defensive stances in his Zerg versus Zerg matchups. But he also defeated, he had some convincing wins over the past few months, defeating people like Delphi, Snoot, Revival, who plays pretty well in MLG, and Forsen. So Sortof is not unfamiliar with this matchup. Some players are saying they kind of struggle with ZVZ sometimes, but then there's players like Astoji who say ZVZ is really nice for them. Even Idris says ZVZ is a comfortable matchup for him.
Yeah, it's getting to that point where it's just the right amount of micro, I think. I mean, Zergling Baneling micro, it's very intimidating at first, but once you get the hang of things, it's actually a lot of fun. And you can do just crazy, tiny little tactical mind games with your opponents and see who comes out the better player. On top of that, there's very, very cool little tricks that you can do. Obviously, if you build the Spire, you don't necessarily have to go mutas, but you can you can actually incur some sort of response. Not saying that's efficient, but that's the type of mind games that you can do. A lot of times I've actually seen and heard of people going the infestation pit right out in the open and then putting a Spire behind that and actually going mass Spire tech, and of course your opponents expect infestors so they don't get spore crawlers. Boom, you hit them right between the legs.
And we'll see how that comes into play. Sort of goes for a very, very early layer in this pick, and I guess in comparison to his opponent, but he's also getting his third, so it just seems that sort of just going to play again very, very defensive-minded until he gets his mutas out. So sort of going to change it up a little bit. Normally we see him go for very standard roach-based armor, but going to go for mutalisks. But whether or not he commits to mutas, we'll find out.
Yeah, I think he's in a position where he's playing this very risky. We're going to go ahead and see both players actually scout each other out. Sortof's going to start things off. But, you know, the scary thing for me is that you see that evolution chamber. If I'm in Sortof's position, I'm like, oh my gosh.
You can set up a timing really nice.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Roaches become so much more powerful when they have their +1 attack. They two-shot Zerglings, meaning the main defense that you have, which is Zergling Muta, is not going to hold up nearly as well. You don't have like a tanking unit. Spine crawlers are actually really tough to actually get over onto the opposite side of the field. But Sortof is going to take a nice win over here, canceling the hatchery and really, I guess, marking his territory, saying you can't take this third until you have good map coverage. And I think that's how Sortof is actually going to play out this game. He's going to say, let me threaten the counterattack rather than giving him the opportunity to push out. Yeah. And then, you know, by the time he actually wants to push out, it will be too late, or we're just going to equalize, and both of us don't have a third base.
Well, we do see that Sortof does not have a Roach Warren yet, so he's going to at least commit to mutas somewhat at this point. He can stop whenever he wants to, ideally, and he needs something like a ground-based army. He's already choosing his transition to infestors eventually. But for now, just like you said, he can always threaten the counterattack, and that's kind of what Daybreak offers. But Dark has to do something. You know, his third is really delayed, and his opponent was playing very greedy tech-wise. And mutas do kill pretty slowly, and the first few mutas have been revealed. And now Dark, he's going to go in two different directions, a couple roaches at the natural, but mainly a lot of roaches at the third. How is Sortof going to deal with it? He doesn't have a lot of drones at the third, so he won't take a lot of losses there. But still, this is going to be very difficult for Sortof to hold. Last time we saw this, Bly completely crumbled. Will Sortof be able to hold this?
And it looks like Sortof will lose that third base over there. Same thing as we've seen, but here's the difference. Sortof has his Zerglings in position to take out his opponent's third base, and he's going to exercise that right now catching off the roaches. And remember, Daybreak's a much bigger map, so it makes it a lot easier to actually defend against these roaches because the roaches need to traverse a longer period in time. That's more time for your mutas to actually be doing damage.
Yeah, it just gives them more coverage as well, and you can see that just because of that distance compared to Cloud Kingdom, like you said, Andre, it's very easy for Sortof to kind of traverse back. And with big maps like that, fast units are just more empowered. Like, it's not just the mutas, but the Zerglings as well. They can rush to and fro however they please, and that's going to make it very hard for Dark to kind of put on any continued aggression, but he's already transitioned to infestors and get his early infestor count.
Missile attack is coming up for Sortof. Very interesting. So he is switching over to Roach Infestor, most likely. But, you know, I have to say, I really like Sortof's position, even though, of course, he has kind of the worst tech in terms of lair tech. I think Infestors are much better progressive tech. He's still in a place where he shut off every single form of map control on the field, or at least map vision. He's forced out a lot of reactions. You can see the amount of queens that are out on the field. And he has kind of delayed the third base so much that it makes it so difficult for his opponent to really be malleable. He can't go and defend against the upcoming army compositions too efficiently. And that's going to help out as we go a little bit farther into the game. And this is what I'm talking about. Look, he's even baiting in fungal growths.
And he's going to try to snipe a couple of the infestors as well, but good control from Dark to kind of latch onto things, and as a result, Sortof's mutas not really that strong anymore. And yeah, he stopped around the 8-9 mark, like we were talking about, and already starting to transition directly back into ground-based army. And one thing that really comes into place is that Sortof, despite all the aggression from Dark in response to his harass, he kept a high drone count. Look at it, Andre, 70 to 51.
Wow. Wow.
Man, that is really comfy for Sortof, especially since he's playing from behind, quote-unquote, in the ground army. But now he's going to be able to cycle through a lot quicker.
And now we have a position where I think Sortof is just massively ahead, and if his opponent doesn't do something quickly and really abuse the timing where he has a little bit more infestors than his opponent, then I think he'll be in a lot of trouble. Sortof will just take a massive advantage. Remember, this hatchery went down when the 2 extractors were up over here, so that's at least 100 seconds where these 2 extractors will be mining. That's an extra approximately like 400 gas. That gas obviously is going to be spent to just get ahead, and that's at least 2 infestors that he has over his opponent.
That's so funny that you mentioned that Sortof may have more infestors than his opponent. Or sorry, yeah, but at the same time, you see that Dark's already really focusing on just getting out his tech and more gases. His gases are severely delayed. And it's just a position that we don't normally see. You know, we see that Dark's the one who always tries to get his infestors out quicker and tries to get him at a higher count. But as a result, not able to keep up production. Something to also mention is sort of his macros hatchery was up a lot earlier, and that's also contributing to why he's able to produce a lot more.
Yeah, that's awesome. The macro hatch is just so important, I think, in every single one of these matchups. I used to think that it was like 4 hatcheries for every 3 bases, but I'm thinking it's 5 hatcheries for every 3 bases. Just so that you can have that excess capabilities. You know, you want to overmake just so that you can splurge it all as soon as you hit that 200 and trade your big armies. So I think Sortof is in a great position. He is going to his 4th base at this point and teching to his Hydra Den. Not yet his hive. No real reason to tech to hive. I think hive units aren't really good in this position. Ultras are normally good, but you have to be going a Zergling Infestor style to begin with, else they're not going to be nearly as effective. So I think we're seeing Sortof just pull way, way ahead in this game.
Sort of trying to attack and kill this geyser. He was trading some of his mutas here and there so he can start incorporating Hydras into his composition, but nice save with the transfuse. Just mini exchanges over here. One thing that's going to start coming into play as well with Hydras onto the field is the limitation of vision for Dark. He already is pretty restricted, but the idea is sort of now controls a lot more vision of the counterattack paths. We saw, I think, just the other day in MLG where Idra got completely sandwiched by Sasquatch, who performed well at MLG. Mad ups to him, especially the Complexity Academy, by the way, for training their players. Well, but what happened was Idra was actually moving down these destructible debris in this position, and because he didn't have vision of his opponent, Sasquatch came from the northern ramp, trapped and fungled his infestors from behind, and sandwiched completely as soon as Idra broke down the wall. So vision comes into huge play in Daybreak, so don't ever feel too comfortable in terms of moving down a certain path unless you know where your opponent's army is.
That's exactly right. Never attack into a place where you don't know what you're attacking into. If you do that, you'll have a bad time.
And yeah, I think that just goes to show you how far the ZVZ matchup has come along to the point where if you play really well positioning-wise, you just get a huge advantage over your opponent. It's going to reward a lot of smart decision-making from both players. And then you see smart little cute things like sometimes people like burrow units or try to like go mash changelings and like try to spread out the entire map for vision. But for now, we see sort of actually splitting up those units.
Loses 2 infestors in the bottom over here. Unfortunate for him, he was trying to just have a little hit squad go into the 3rd base, but very nicely placed overseer will catch everything. And we might have a big attack coming in from 3 different sides. Queens are going to get picked off immediately.
Ooh, very nice. Just any kind of reduction of DPS and transfuses. A lot of infestors are getting caught out of position as well. A lot of infested Terrans are being dropped, and Sortof has a lot of energy compared to his opponent, but at the same time, the infested Terrans came out a lot quicker for Dark, but it doesn't even matter. The Hydras are adding phenomenal amount of DPS, and the upgrades are very similar for both players, so it comes down purely to the amount of army. And in the end, Dark does have a supply lead because he does manage to kill off a lot of the units of Sortof, but both players' banks have been exhausted, and the remax has already been committed. In the end, both players trade pretty evenly, but it comes down to the infestor count. And after closer examination, 9-7, while managing to preserve most of it. Well done by both players.
I think Sortof actually came out on top from that battle just because he has still remaining infestor energy. If he actually exerts his attack yet again, he'll be in a really, really good position. But he's just going to sit back. I think the spine crawlers are correct. He needs to be careful because he's like, okay, wait until my infestor count can actually do something, right? I can actually have energy to attack into something or, you know, defend against something. But here we go, the second attack. is commencing.
Oh, and you can see that the Hydras are a little bit exposed, has to kind of reel them back, but Dark doing a good job holding thus far. Part of the reason why you have to attribute it is that he does have a pretty decent creep spread, at least so that he can cover bases in case he needs to emergency, I guess, reposition himself. Now, both players are expanding to each other's corners, and you can see that Sortof is harassing slightly, but now it's to the point where, well, how can I really realistically attack into their other opponent, especially with spine crawlers popping up for Dark. I don't think Sortof can really press in here unless he gets a huge advantage. And now you can see he's morphing the Greater Spire. Now, Andre, I've always struggled with this in late game ZVZ the few times I've been in it. If I make Broodlords, how many do I make? You know, do I even really get more than like 2 or 3? Because I feel like, you know, at one point, if they just make Corruptors and kill it, that's more supply and gas committed. Army supply is so key. What are your thoughts as we enter an unfamiliar zone of ZVZ?
You know, it's so funny because I was going to say exactly 4, and 4 Corruptors popped, and it was 4 Broodlords that are being made right now. I think 4 is the perfect number because it basically says it does enough damage to say, hey, come into me when you're actually attacking forward. That way you don't have to attack into spine crawlers, but it doesn't commit too much, I think, supply that it becomes a problem where you just can't keep up with your opponent. They can just keep doing these backstabs, counterattacks, and you're in a position where it's your Broodlords are just in the most awkward positions at all times. So I feel like 4 is a great number. From here, I would really like to see Sortof actually exchanging his Roaches out for a Hydras. He can do that by actually dropping. Dropping is something that is super underutilized in this matchup, I think. But yeah, if he goes and drops, I think that would be the most fantastic thing. And Dark is actually going to initiate that sequence.
Dropping Infestors.
8 Infestors heading over towards the main.
Coincidentally enough, Sortof has a Roach squad moving to the south. Now, Dark does see this. He's going to get there in time.
Oh, my. And
but
big engagement coming in here. He actually snipes one of the... No, he doesn't get the Infestor. Almost. But Broodlords are coming in from the front as well. The Roaches are going to be blindsided over here on the bottom, but they're going to meet up with their friends, of course, in the center of the map. The top actually gets destroyed over here. Of course, Fungals are going to help dramatically. And here's the Infestors inside the main base. And there's the Infested Terrans. Beach balls galore.
There are a lot of Infested Terrans, but a lot of Infestors got picked off at the center of the map as well. Lots of energy basically sniped here, and the 4 Broodlords are sieging the Spine Crawlers very well. Look at the main get completely torn up. Hive being targeted down immediately. Another counterattack at the natural of Sortof as well. And Dark is everyone on the map. He's sending another squad out to the top left as well. This is just incredible aggression, of course. Dark is trying to pull and punish Sortof for his lack of mobility. Broodlords slow down your army so much. It's true in other matchups, and it's true here in ZVZ. Dark does take care of the main base. It also has a couple Brood Infestors. Now starting to work on the exterior center expansion. And now more Broodlords are popping for Sortof, now counting to 8. And this center expansion for Dark will die, but in the end, how much will he have given up? How much is Sortof sacrificed to be able to do this attack?
Yeah, it's just too much at this point, Frodan. Here we can see another attack coming in here with Infested Terrans at the natural, and Sortof really not reacting. There's just too much stuff going on all around the map. He's not able to trade fast enough, and for that he is being punished so hard. Roaches and Hydras galore everywhere, and I feel like, you know, this could have been mitigated slightly with the power of the Spine Crawlers. I mean, Spine Crawlers have become, I don't want to say a new unit, but a unit that's being used like crazy these days, and people are seeing the power of Spine Crawlers against Ultras even. You know, there's a big time where I think Zergling Infestor Ultra was the go-to, but now that Infested Terrans and Spine Crawlers are being utilized correctly, I think that era is over. One
thing that might help sort of push him in favor, though, is that he has an insane amount of Infestor energy. Almost all of them are full, and you can kind of zone them to use the Corruptor, or to zone the Corruptors away. But yeah, his ability to remax has been very limited. The Hydralisk Den has been killed. The Greater Spire, all these tech buildings in the main will just dry, or will drown actually, from lack of creep. Or is it even drowning? I don't even know. Bleeding out. That's what it is.
Yeah. Oh my god, this Overseer's so close to actually seeing all those Infestors skirt by into the third base. It looks like there's the Infested Terrans. They get popped out yet again. These Infestors have been absolutely insane how much damage they've been doing is so critical, I think, in this game. Just 8 infestors taking out a main, a natural, and now a third base. What more can you ask for in a group of units?
I think now Sortof has to really start wondering whether or not he's going to be able to clear out his opponent faster than what he can do. He needs to start bringing his drones around. Now, he doesn't have that much bank. In fact, he only has enough to really make 2 extractors. So Sortof has to be very, very discerning with how he approaches the situation, because he loses everything. It doesn't even matter. He has a stronger army confrontation-wise, but will he be able to hold it off? A huge pack of his roaches are baiting out infested Terran energies. It's a very good job there. But again, Sortof has to really, really be cautious.
Yes, he does. There is going to be a situation where I think Dark is going to say, I don't want to actually confront this army. I think my investments are better well spent just killing everything else, but maybe not. His infestors all the way over on the left-hand side do look like they're coming over.
Andre at the natural. Sortof's drones are all being picked off, and Sortof is trying to run away as well. He needs every single drone because he's losing his ability to make other buildings, but the important thing is that Dark also has the Broodlords out of position as well. He's going to be able to protect all his Broodlords. The Corruptors are rushing to try to see if they can aid as well, but there's just so much anti-air. Lots of Fungals locking the Broodlords in place, and Dark is trying to use his infested Terrans to clear up his opponent's infested Terrans. And this is just so much madness. Infestors also dropping more infested Terrans. Dark trying to clear out Sortof's Broodlords. But what is happening? So much energy being spent from both sides. Both players need to protect their infestors as much as possible. Andre, I can't even tell what's going on the screen anymore. Corruptors are chasing the Broodlords, but they're getting locked down by the fungal growths.
I'm not even going to act like I know what's going on. This is absolutely insane. All I see is Fungals and infested Terrans all over the place. And I think both these players at this point are crossing their fingers saying, I hope I come out on top. But Sortof is going to lose his last Broodlord. Oh my god.
Dark manages to come on top. And it was one of those situations where there's like 100 guys jumping on a single rugby ball, and somehow one guy manages to grab a hold of it. Madness is what I describe this entire game, between the counterattacks, the non-stop engagements around all parts of Daybreak. I am blown away by the level of play we've seen in this ZVZ.
That was crazy. That was absolutely crazy. And that's what you get, though, sort of, for going against the Infestor King. I mean, Dark is known
Don't
for
try to out-infester.
Don't try to out-infester Dark, man. He will get you every single time. But realistically, the Broodlord switch, even though it is so powerful, the 4th base in that center expansion goes down. What happens is you're prone to counterattacks. If you're not protecting yourself on all sides, you will be punished. And that's what happened. 8 infestors cleaned out the main, the natural, the 3rd base. You saw roaches, hydras going on all over the place. It was a situation where he had so much time to tech up into corruptors, then to broodlords, then get another infestor count to deal with your infestors, because that's how slow they are at dealing damage.